fresh from his appearance with Skip Rutherford of the Clinton School, which is, I guess, moved to Robinson Theater. We go to the News Radio 1029 KARN Newsmaker line, and we welcome United States Senator Tom Cotton. Sir, I've said it before, I'll say it again. They're sheep, they're wolves, but you're a sheepdog, and we love you. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Doc. That's kind of you.
Appreciate that. I know we've only got about 7 minutes here, so I'm just going to try to get as many questions in as I possibly can. A lot of folks were really surprised when the president appointed David Shulkin to be head of the Veterans Administration, a fellow who had already been appointed by the previous president. I just want to know, you, of course, as a veteran, as a war hero, what you think the options are for improving the Veterans Administration. There have been so many scandals, and are we going to be able to get it to the point where veterans have the choice to get their health care where they want it to be, whether at the VA or from a private physician, because we hear a lot of complaints about private physicians being slow paid and that sort of thing. Where are we with the Veterans Administration?
Doc, that is my goal. That is Donald Trump's goal. That is David Shulkin's goal. You're right that he served in the Obama administration. He was appointed towards the end. He was the leader on some of the initiatives to try to reform the VA coming out of those scandals in 2014 in Phoenix and elsewhere.
All right. So that obviously is something that, in other words, don't hold it against him that he was in the previous administration. You and the president and the new director, David Shulkin, are all on the same page.
That's right, Doc. In fact, the president just signed the Veterans Choice Reauthorization Act today. That'll extend the life of the Choice program, that is a pilot program allowing more veterans to choose to get health care in their local communities outside of the traditional VA system. And he did that in part to give himself and his team time to introduce more far-reaching reforms that I hope we'll see in the coming months. Good.
Fantastic. All right. I guess about a year and a half, 2 years ago, one of your colleagues, Senator Cruz, asked former Joint Chiefs Chairman Martin Dempsey what would be how can we defeat ISIS militarily. He was told, I'm sorry, can't do that. Obviously, under this new president, we have a completely different kind of foreign policy. I think a lot of us love the fact that he dropped the mother of all bombs on ISIS. We've got a really dicey situation between Islamist rebels and a really bad guy in charge of Syria. Where do you see our foreign policy going in the Middle East? And are there any good options, for that matter, in Syria?
Well, first, Doc, I want to commend the president for the strikes that he took against Syria a couple of weeks ago. Proportionate, targeted strikes to punish the Assad regime for using chemical weapons on its own people.
Right.
And I think all your listeners saw the video of those poor children, even babies, writhing in pain or suffocating to death. And Bashar al-Assad got exactly what he deserves.
Absolutely.
Now, it wasn't just a humanitarian gesture, though. It was an important message to Assad and to his patrons and everyone else all around the world, friend and foe, that the United States is no longer so reluctant to use our power to protect our interests.
Right.
And we simply cannot accept when countries who are signatories of the Chemical Weapons Convention use chemical weapons on a battlefield where we have hundreds of American troops and thousands of our allied troops. So I think that was a very important step in restoring our credibility, which is a first step towards getting back in the game of trying to reach a diplomatic and political solution in Syria.
Yeah.
The president and his team is undergoing a careful review of our Syria policy more broadly, so I don't want to prejudge what they'll say, but I agree with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson that it's hard to see how any political solution will keep the Assad family in power. And that's not just a statement of American policy. That's a fact that you've got millions of Syrians who have been resisting and fighting him for 6 years.
Sure.
And our key allies in the region are opposed to him remaining in power as well. But those airstrikes provide the battlefield torque to get the United States back in the diplomatic game.
Right, absolutely. But I guess a lot of us are concerned, and you know a lot more about the situation than we do, that the idea of moderate Islamist rebels is something we have a hard time wrapping our minds around. You got ISIS, you got Al-Qaeda, you got al-Nusra, you got all these groups out there, and the concern is what you do with the other guys, which are just horrible.
Well, you're right, Doc. There's horrible mess in Syria, made much worse by 6 years of inaction under the Obama administration.
Sure, yeah.
Unfortunately, our failure to support just ordinary, normal Syrians who are not radical Islamists, but were simply defending themselves and their families and their communities from an outlaw regime, has driven many of those people into the arms of more radical groups. Because if the radical groups are the only one defending your hometown against
what are you going to do?
Syrian regime and Iran and its Hezbollah shock troops, you don't have much choice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the law of the jungle. That's the law of the frontier. Now, it is also true, though, that working with our allies, we do have pretty good relationships across Syria, for instance, with the Syrian Kurds in northern Syria that have been very effective in rolling back ISIS in some of its territory. Ultimately, they can't seize back Arab lands because Arab don't want Kurds on their own lands, which is, again, why it's so important that we have the prestige and the perception of power in Syria and the broader Middle East, that we can lead the negotiations that will ultimately lead to a suitable outcome.
Absolutely. Quick question for you. IRS Commissioner Koskinen, I think, was in the middle of the IRS scandals that Congress was trying to hold the previous administration accountable for. He still has his job. I know an incoming administration has to juggle a lot of balls all at once. If the president asked for your advice, would you say we need a new IRS commissioner?
We do need a new IRS commissioner, Doc. We needed one long ago. Mr. Koskinen has not reformed the IRS as was his mandate, and he is contemptuous of Congress and therefore contemptuous of the people that elect the Congress. The president and his team may have reasons for keeping him in on the short term, but the president needs his own commissioner of the IRS, one who will respect taxpayers and their rights.
Absolutely. Great job on getting Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. You were part of that as much as anybody in the United States Senate. Of course, Harry Reid set the precedent for getting rid of the filibuster on other federal courts. So obviously, Leader McConnell didn't feel any compunctions when he had to do that. Is the next Supreme Court nominee going to be as easy to get on the court as this one? Because we're all looking at the actuarial tables, the ages of Supreme Court justices, and all thinking that President Trump will get another one or two, obviously, in his first administration here. What do you see going forward on that?
Yeah, you never know, Doc, what's going to happen with the Supreme Court. Obviously, no one expected Justice Scalia to pass away last February in an untimely tragedy. The president, I know, though, is committed to moving quickly to fill any vacancies on the Supreme Court. I want to commend three people for this entire process that led to such a favorable outcome. First, President Trump, for sticking to his pledge in the campaign to pick a jurist off that list. Second, to Mitch McConnell for standing strong throughout last year, saying we'd let the American people make the decision about who would pick the next Supreme Court justice, and then holding together all 52 Republicans in the Senate. And second, Neil Gorsuch for an outstanding performance at his confirmation hearings and his private visits with senators, and for being such a distinguished jurist to get himself in the position to rise to the Supreme Court. And I was very pleased this week to see Justice Gorsuch on the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. One of the first things he said in the first case was, well, why don't we just look at the plain meaning of the law?
That pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, it is revolutionary with some of these justices, that's for sure. Tom Cotton, God bless you. We appreciate you. Please come see us when you could be in studio. We'd love to have you on for longer, but we certainly appreciate you handling all these issues today, and Godspeed. As we say here in the Natural State, y'all come see us.
Thank you, Doc.